Greetings and welcome to the podcast channel of the Major Contemporary Strategic Issues Chair. The theme for 2024 is Confrontations and Strategic Recompositions. This episode is an extract from the lecture given by Mr Nobumasa Akiyama, Professor, Faculty of Law, Hitotsubashi University, Japan. The conference is entitled Strategic Confrontations and Nuclear Risks in East Asia. Don't hesitate to subscribe to our podcast or YouTube channel to keep up to date with all our publications. We hope you enjoy listening.
Thank you very much for a very kind introduction, Professor Akiyama. And also, I really appreciate that you extended the invitation to me and given a chance to address the very important issue on the nuclear proliferation, nuclear deterrence, possible arms control and disarmament with a focus on East Asia. So as was introduced, I'm from Hitotsubashi University. I'm sure it's very difficult for you to pronounce Hitotsubashi. And so this is actually my challenge as well, that, I maybe ask you to remember the name of my university. And since I'm also engaged in some sort of international programs at my university. But my real challenge is today I'm going to speak about strategic confrontation and nuclear risks in East Asia. And this problem itself is a very difficult challenge, and addressing and framing in a more elaborated manner about what kind of risks we are facing, and then also how are we going to tackle these challenges. That is a very, very difficult thing. And I don't think I'm able to provide you an answer to these questions, but I would like to pitch in some questions to you. And, I would like to, together with you, think about what we need to do. And in particular, I was very much impressed with the program, the names of the other invitees, and, so many eminent persons on the list. And I'm a little bit nervous that I can line up among others. And also, I'm a little nervous today, glad to speak in front of you. Now, in Japan, in my university, after the COVID-19, the big classes with more than 200 students are all online. So I have rare chance to speak in front of such a big crowd. So I'm a little nervous today, but I hope that, I should be able to provide you some sort of a useful information and some hints to think about, what kind of, issues, problems that Asia facing. And secondly, the challenge is, in the past, when we talk about nuclear arms control, the nuclear deterrence, and so forth, people tend to focus on transatlantic relationship, how the United States and Russia have shaped their relationship over nuclear weapons. And then people tend to kind of decouple the two fronts, Europe and Asia. I think some of you may recall the process of negotiation of INF Treaty. So when the United States and the Soviet Union at that time were negotiating, they were almost to agree about the arrangements that SS-20 of Soviet Union were relocated to the eastern part of the Soviet Union. Then, in fact, that was in early 80s. The Japanese government requested the U.S. government do not compromise with Russia, just pursue 0-0 option. That means no deployment of SS-20 in Europe, no in Asia. So the total abolition of medium-range missiles. So Japan at that time was, for the first time in history, informally involved in the arms control. But that is somewhat behind the history, and people don't pay much attention to that. But now I think many people are more or less kind of concerned about nuclear buildup in Asia. So, it is the moment for us that we have to think about nuclear deterrence or nuclear arms control, not by region, but in a kind of way that we kind of combine together Asia and European theaters. So I'm going to touch upon this part in detail in the later of my presentation. So the theme of my paper or presentation. So in the midst of rising of nuclear risks, how are we going to reduce the nuclear salience in the East Asian security environment? So, I thought that, in particular after the outbreak of the war in Ukraine, in Asia, many people are more concerned about the risk of nuclear weapons. So, but the war in Ukraine is not the only factor which raised the concern about the nuclear instability in the region. So what are the key elements that shape the current regional security dynamics, particularly in nuclear dynamics in East Asia? That's the first thing I would like to address. The secondly, if we are going to avoid any nuclear escalation, the question to us is, how are we going to define the stability? As you may recall, that the U.S.-Soviet relationship is often characterized as a kind of a pursuit of strategic stability. And strategic stability in the context of U.S.-Russia arms control is pretty much shaped through the thorough consultations between two and the negotiations, and that was institutionalized through arms control treaties and attached so many arrangements for the confidence building and verification and so forth. But in East Asia, we don't have any solid arrangement, nor the dialogue. So how are we going to define the stability? And so this is the question number 2. And question number 3, then what are the measures that can be taken to mitigate the nuclear risks and eventually reduce such risks? And obviously, as I mentioned earlier, this third question is an unsolved question. And probably it is pretty difficult for us to find any solution near-term future. So it is important for us still to think about what can we do and what we have to do now. So this is a kind of summary of East Asian regional security situation. So what I characterize the current status of the security environment in East Asia is, one, we are witnessing the rapid expansion of nuclear arsenals by China and North Korea. Number 2, with this expansion of nuclear arsenals of China, we are witnessing kind of missile gap or disparity of the missile capabilities both at the global and regional levels in different kinds. And in particular at the regional level, that China has more than 1,500 ground-based medium-range missile, but the United States doesn't have nothing. It doesn't have anything, right? So because of INF. So INF certainly contributed to some extent the stability in the Europe. But because of that, now, we are suffering from the question of how we are going to deal with this huge missile gap. The third is there is a kind of rise of threat perception on the regional conflict over the Taiwan Strait and on the Korean Peninsula. And finally, we are witnessing also the multi-domain entanglement and hybrid warfare under the long nuclear shadow. So the modality of the conflict, modality of the risks of the conflict in Asia is pretty much multifaceted, and also that involves a lot of domains, not only in nuclear, but the conventional forces and the new domains such as cyber, space, or a so-called, we call it gray zone or hybrid warfare, which includes a lot of elements of non-military, activities by maybe partly militias, partly by the, disinformation operation teams and so forth. So our environment in Asia is so complicated. And I think you may see, this, if you see these kind of this list of complexities, you might think, oh, similar to Europe. Yes, it is. And that's why now in Asia, we kind of more concerned about Ukraine. I'm going to touch upon it a little bit more later, but very interestingly, in Japan, the huge percentage of the population are still interested in what's going on in Ukraine, and still, it's been 2 years, and this is third year, so. Some people are talking about kind of the decline in the interest in the Ukraine, but I think the Japanese public remains so much interested in the what's going on in Ukraine. Also, majority are strongly supportive of Ukraine, and so that's kind of security environment aspect. So, as a response, what are the alliances doing? One of the most important questions is how we, Japan and ROK in particular, are watching or looking at the implication of the war in Ukraine in the context of the credibility of extended nuclear deterrence. Secondly, at the same time, Japan, ROK, and other partners of the alliances are working to strengthen their own capabilities for the defense, and also try to strengthen the coordination with the United States in having a relatively kind of fair division of labor and establishing coordination mechanism for the joint operations. And so here is a summary of the nuclear buildup by two major countries. So China, as Professor Gutierrez mentioned, based upon the assessment of the Pentagon in the United States, so China may acquire 1,000 nuclear warheads by 2030 and possibly 1,500 warheads by 2035. Now, United States and Russia deploy 1,550 warheads each. So, this number, 1,000 or 1,500, are not the number of the warheads deployed, but the possessed. So, it's, still compared to the United States and Russia, which each possess probably 5,000 to 6,000 warheads. It's a relatively lower number, but still, if you think that your neighborhood got the 1,000 warheads, while we are zero, what will be our perception? And secondly, that China is improving the robustness or resilience of deterrence against United States with solid fueled, TEL type DF-31. DF-31 is ICBM and road mobile launchers. and also the longer range DF-41 and longer range JL-3. That is SLBM. So that's kind of redundant. I mentioned touch upon this at the bottom of the China part. So the current Chinese SLBM can shoot deliver the warheads to the targets 8,000 kilometers away. But that means the Chinese strategic submarines has to advance to the middle of the Pacific Ocean in order to deliver their nuclear warheads into mainland United States. But if the China replace these JL2 with JL3, then Chinese strategic submarines could stay in South China Sea in order to deliver the warheads into mainland United States. So it is important for us to see how the resilience of their strategic nuclear arsenal has been developed and acquiring more robust nuclear deterrence. So with this, and also with this, some people mentioned that the Chinese nuclear strategy is shifting from minimum deterrence to limited deterrence and assured retaliation. And also that China has been said that it has employed the no first use policy. So no first use means that you are not going to use nuclear weapons unless your adversary uses nuclear weapons. But what China is doing is extensive investment on the early warning system, and also they are now kind of conducting drills with the scenario of launch on warning. So that's the indication that China may abandon the traditional nuclear posture of no first use. And I think that U.S. and Japanese strategists started to assume that we should not count on their declaratory policies. But anyway, the problem is we don't know, because China doesn't disclose any information by themselves on their nuclear capabilities and the doctrines. So, without the confidence on the information that they provide, it is pretty natural for us to assume the worst case scenario. So in that case, we don't really count on their no first use policy anymore. And that's a kind of strategic level. But at the regional level, they're also seeking the dominance. So I think many of you have heard about the concept of anti-access area denial capabilities. That means United States may not be able to deploy their military assets because of the Chinese capability to deny it. So that includes the missiles which could shoot the U.S. aircraft carriers, and also try to destroy the bases in Guam and so forth. So United States may not deploy their maritime capability assets in case of contingencies if this A2AD capability of China works. And so with these nuclear and missile capabilities, we are more concerned that China may take more assertive actions in the region. But North Korea, so they are extensively conducting missile tests. So we call it tests, but I don't think they should not be called as tests anymore. So they are now improving their operational capabilities through these exercises. And also the rate of success in their testing or missile launch are remarkably high. So they rarely fail. And, we kind of assume that somebody is helping. Otherwise, I think this rapid improvement of the technology may not happen. But in 2022, so it's a bit old data, but they conducted more than 70 missile launches. And so with so many diverse types of the missiles, and also from different types of launching platforms. Secondly, North Korea, actually last year, IAEA reported that North Korea has completed the construction of light water reactor, and this close to the heavy water reactor in Yongbyon. And so, as you are aware, the reprocessing of spent fuel from a light water reactor is the way how you create the fissile material plutonium, which could be used for the production of nuclear warheads. So North Korea probably is increasing the stockpile of usable weapon grade plutonium, and that lead us into question what will be the size of the North Korean nuclear arsenal. Secondly, North Korea recently announced that they are developing so-called maneuverable tactical nukes. And, this is not really deterrent against the United States. But, we naturally assume that the tactical nukes could be used on the Korean Peninsula in the fight against the South Korea. And recently, Kim Jong-un announced that, the Republic of Korea, South Korea, is kind of designated as an enemy, and the North Korea officially gave up the unification of the peninsula. And so accordingly, they announced a change of the constitution. So, North Korea decided to show more hostile attitude toward the South Korea, and the development of maneuverable tactical nuclear weapons suggests they are trying to use nuclear assets in fighting a war or trying to take an advantage of nuclear coercion, if not the use of nuclear weapons. So we traditionally think that because, the North Korea officially sought the unification of the peninsula, so, if they use nuclear weapons against South Koreans, it undermines the legitimacy of their claim. So, if they were to use nuclear weapons or they were to coerce with the nuclear weapons, the targets could be the United States or Japan. But now, they, have their tactical nuclear weapons, and, with possible use against the South Koreans, our strategic calculation becomes more complicated. So, and also I should touch upon the Taiwan issue. I think if you ask to the Japanese people, what will be the most likely scenario of the war in East Asia, many people answer that would be Taiwan. And probably somebody might ask me, my assessment of the likelihood of that Taiwan war over Taiwan Strait. And my answer is, I don't know, really. But I think it is important for us to think about some possibilities and prepare for that. So then, what will be the possible scenarios that the crisis could escalate into actual conflict? Several scenarios, and I now try to share two possible scenarios. One, China could attack, islands surrounding Taiwan, and so that is kind of limited the island's invasion scenario, and that probably undermines the Taiwan government's authority, and also that is a kind of indication that China is going to control the South China Sea as well. But if the China is able to do that, probably that the risk could extend into the safety or the security of the sea lane of communication, and that leads us into the possible scenario of blockade of Taiwan. And if blockade happens, then the Taiwanese economy will be severely damaged. So that probably that's something that we are currently worrying about. The another thing, which is not mutually exclusive with for the one which I mentioned, the hybrid warfare. So, that China may try to overthrow the Taiwanese government by sabotage, harassments, cyber attacks, or disinformation operation. And of course, it really totally depends on the resilience of the Taiwanese society and the democracy. So, and many Japanese are sympathetic to the Taiwanese democracy. And now the overwhelming majority of the Taiwanese population never had experience with the mainland China controlling the Taiwan. So, it is somewhat difficult for the Chinese to be successful in the disinformation operations, but we witness extensive kind of activities on the disinformation and try to undermine the democracy in Taiwan. And so under such circumstances, what is Japan's response? One of the prominent politician, Taro Aso, the former prime minister, recently mentioned that Taiwan contingency is Japan's contingency or Japan's existential threat. And interestingly, if in the past, if somebody's like a former prime minister said so, the public may get angry, like saying like, are you guys trying to drag Japan into the war or something? But now many Japanese public are sympathetic to what Mr. Aso said. So the Japanese people are growingly concerned about the risks that they face in terms of a Taiwan crisis. Why Taiwan does matter to Japan? One, if Taiwan is put under the control of China, then probably the security of Japan's sea land communication is significantly undermined. So some might say, China will do that. The problem is we don't know. That's why we are concerned. There is no guarantee that China is going to help us securing the sea land communication, as we witness that the Chinese government is trying to use the economic means to control our behavior. For example, our businessmen were kept and arrested for some unknown reasons, and they stopped the export of important materials to Japan without showing any reasons. Probably we just guess that's kind of a retaliation against Japan's action. And also that China has not yet approved the discharge of the treated water of the Fukushima nuclear the reactors. In fact, it is completely safe, and the IAEA said there is no environmental risk from discharged water. So, and Korea said it's okay, it's fine, and others said it's fine, but only China said no, it's dangerous. So we are not going to import the Japanese fish, although Chinese fishing boats come to Japan and then they catch the fish from there and that's sold in China. So I was not so sure whether importing from Japan and catching by themselves make the difference in safety. But anyway, so that's what's going on. So the sea land communication is no guarantee, and that's one thing. The other is if the contingency happened on Taiwan, that United States is going to help them. And if United States is determined to help Taiwan militarily, then I think they have no choice but use their assets located in Japan. So in that case, I think Japanese self-defense forces would act to escort the U.S. forces or provide logistical support. So, we have no choice but helping the United States, supporting the United States, working with the United States, given that our alliance is vital for Japan's security. So, in two ways, the Taiwan contingency is Japan's existential threat. So, the thing is, I talked about Taiwan contingency, the rise of the nuclear buildup by China and North Korea. So how are they combined? The problem is this kind of crisis scenarios will be evolved under the strong influence of nuclear weapons. So, and this, way of thinking, how nuclear shadow affects the regional conflict is, in our case, pretty much driven by our witness on the war in Ukraine. So, war in Ukraine seems to be evolving under the strong, the long nuclear shadow casted by Russia. And that created the situation of stability-instability paradox. That means the United States and the Russia may not directly engage in a nuclear war or even a conventional war because they are concerned about the all-out war. But because of the both mentality to avoid direct engagement, there may be more risk at the regional level of the conflict. So the stable relationship between China and the United States may create concerns to security concern on Japan and Republic of Korea and other regional players in East Asia. And so that seems to be a kind of a situation where we are witnessing in Ukraine. So over Ukraine, United States and the Russia are kind of implicitly agreeing, or they are deterring each other, so they are not going to directly engage in the fight. But because of that, Russia may thought that they could be more aggressive at the regional level. So the second is, even though we think that Russia would not use nuclear weapons, but we still think that this possibility cannot be completely eliminated. So we always have to think about the risk of all-out war. And in fact, at very early stage of the war, in 2022, the President Biden said that the U.S. interest is to avoid the Third World War. So, it's a kind of indication that the President of the United States was at a certain point worrying about the all-out war. And ironically, this statement may have given the Russia a thought, or Putin thought about United States reluctance to engage in the support of Ukraine. I don't know. Maybe we need to wait until this event and the war becomes history to find what really was going on there. But I know there may be a possibility that such a statement send a wrong signal to the Russians. The third one, which is also a kind of the discourse or narrative which prevailed in the early stage of the war, that because Ukraine didn't have nuclear weapons, Russia was able to invade, and then, but instead of having nuclear weapons or giving up nuclear weapons, Ukraine made an agreement with Russia, United States, and UK on negative security assurance, which is that the non-nuclear weapon states won't be attacked by the nuclear weapons, by nuclear armed states. And of course, it's about the nuclear attacks. But at least in the Budapest Memorandum, which is the agreement among Russia, Ukraine, US, and UK, there was an agreement that those members of this agreement would not attack the Ukraine and guarantee their territorial integrity. But this promise was broken. So that poses the question of how much the commitment by nuclear weapon states, nuclear armed states, can be trustworthy. And fourth, as a kind of a side effect, the negotiation on the follow-on Treaty of New START between United States and Russia is now stuck. So, and now, in East Asia, many people have started to worry about any stable relationship between United States and China, which is absent now. So, is it really possible for two major powers in the region to engage in the arms control? And without arms control, what happens? And some people are relatively negative or pessimistic about the role that arms control played. But my assessment is that I think arms control certainly played an important role in shaping the war in Ukraine. One, INF Treaty prohibits that not only the United States but Russia to develop and the medium-range missiles. So imagine if there were many medium-range missiles possessed by Russia, probably the situation in Ukraine could be different. So, the arms control had some role to play in shaping the modality of the war. But in Asia, nothing really is going on about it. That's kind of regional implication. And looking to some sort of implication on the international order, I think obviously the deterioration of the nuclear taboo happened. Secondly, people started to worry about the sustainability of peace and security stability based on rules and institutions. So let me get into some detailed logic of this regional security under the long nuclear shadow and stability and stability paradox. The biggest question, of course, is, did deterrence work? If it works, in what way? Right. So in the early stage of the war, or even before the war started, we were worried if the Mr. Putin would decide to use nuclear weapons, based upon the existing doctrines that Russia had disclosed, the way how they conducted the military exercises and deployment of nuclear capable short and medium range missiles in the front line of the border with the Ukraine. So these indications are the signals that to us that suggesting that they might use nuclear weapons. So when the United States and the European countries are relatively slow or more restricted by themselves in supporting Ukraine, in Asia, we thought that probably United States and NATO countries were deterred by Russians. But on the other hand, probably Russia was also deterred by the United States. I think the way that Russia mobilized their assets is also somewhat restrained. Maybe that could be based upon the miscalculation of how they will be successful in their operations, or it could be driven by some consideration of the strategic goals that they are trying to achieve. But again, for us, Russia also control the level of escalation by carefully looking at how Europe and United States would react. But then the another question further goes, was the United States really deterred? In particular, I think United States has been engaged with the Ukraine in terms of supporting the Ukraine fighting the battle through the provision of information on targets and sharing the intelligence and so forth, which are now key to the modern warfare. So, I think the way how they support are pretty much different from what we are thinking about, the conventional warfare. So probably United States may not be deterred as much as we thought originally, but still, the existence of nuclear weapons partly determine the way how we, perceive the war in Ukraine. And again, so then as I mentioned earlier, that created the consideration of stability paradox. So Russia and the United States are to tell each other. Nuclear-armed states, including France, may be deterred. That's why they are the restraints in supporting Ukraine. Then, the non-nuclear allies are suffering from the lack of shortage of support. And so in such a way, the nuclear-armed aggressor was able to be more assertive, more aggressive. And this picture seems to be like in a situation in the Asia. And it's really, really striking to me how Japanese public opinion changed about the nuclear weapons. And also in defense in general. Japan has been keeping kind of about 1% ceiling of the GDP, 1%, the ceiling of the defense budget, which is 1% of the GDP. Once it was broken and it became 1.1 or 1.2%, but then eventually that was reduced a little bit below 1.0%. But this ceiling was easily broken without any strong political resistance. And that was very impressive to me. And the another issue is that Japan now planning to acquire long-range strike capabilities. And in the past, they thought, and the people thought, that having a long-range strike capability is against the Constitution. But now, the majority believe that this will be okay under the current Constitution. So let me a little bit explain about the Japan's debate on nuclear weapons. 3 days after the invasion started, former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe mentioned that Japan should consider possibility of nuclear sharing. So nuclear sharing, I think you are very much familiar with this concept, right? So the NATO allies, the European allies, host the American tactical nukes. Then when the decision is jointly made by the United States and the European NATO allies, then, for example, the German aircrafts carry the nuclear tactical bomb, and the German pilots actually drop the bomb in the battlefield. And so this nuclear sharing could be the wrong way that it strengthens the alliance. This is what the message by the former Prime Minister Abe, and this was echoed by several politicians and also some journalists and so forth. background of this statement is the question about the credibility of extended nuclear deterrence. So that means United States may not use nuclear weapons for Japan if Japan is invaded. So, but the problem is the nuclear sharing actually doesn't solve the problem of the credibility of the commitment. Because if the concern that Japan may have against the credibility of a U.S. commitment, the basic structure of the problem is that the United States has a power to decide whether or not to use nuclear weapons. In case of nuclear sharing, does this problem fade away? No, I don't think so. No, in case of a nuclear sharing, decision to use nuclear weapons is normally made jointly by the United States and allies. In other words, United States still retains the veto power to use nuclear weapons. Even if Japan wanted the United States to use nuclear weapons, as long as US says no, so nuclear weapons won't be employed. So the nuclear sharing and the extended nuclear deterrence have same problems of the credibility of a U.S. commitment. So I think we need to find an alternative solution. That is to strengthen the consultation mechanism between two countries. And at this moment, I'm not aware of the situation that how much they share the scenarios or so forth. But I think in the future, I think United States and Japan will closely consult on the possible scenarios, including the situation where the employment of nuclear weapons are involved. Otherwise, the joint operation of the alliance may not function very well in case of real contingencies. So that's the way how our discussion on the strengthening alliance evolved from the discussion on nuclear sharing. But another interesting thing is, despite of that kind of discussion among the experts, the 70% of the public support the discussion on nuclear sharing. So if the nuclear sharing happens, that may force us to change so-called 3 non-nuclear principles: not to possess, not to use, and not to introduce nuclear weapons. So not introduce means that, we so far will not allow the nuclear weapons to deploy or store on the soil of Japan. But if nuclear sharing arrangement is taken place, I think this third principle would have to be taken away. So, it doesn't necessarily mean that the Japanese nuclear taboo mentality is gone. I don't think so. But, the Japanese people started really think about the scenarios and risks that Japan may face in case of regional conflict scenarios. In ROK, the situation is a little bit different. And I'm also still figuring out what are the real kind of answer to them. But in this one of the surveys, and then maybe other surveys too, the 70% of the respondents supported the nuclear option, national nuclear option of South Korea. And if I ask experts in South Korea, they are all negative, both in terms of technological capabilities. They don't have the capability to produce fissile materials. So unless they got transfer of fissile materials from allies or something, United States, for example, United States, they are not able to produce nuclear weapons. So this technological barrier is one reason. And secondly, the experts had kind of similar logic like Japan. So even though the South Korea's got nuclear weapons, I think they alone cannot really cope with the threat posed by North Korea. They need the United States. So I think the ultimate solution is to strengthen the alliance. And also another reason which I have for the sort of negative assessment of our own nuclear option is probably United States doesn't like to see its allies to decide to fight a nuclear war or not. In other words, United States may not want to get involved in a war started by its ally. In particular, if that is a nuclear war, they don't want to be involved. So I think the United States want to decide whether or not to use nuclear weapon by itself, not by others. For that, on our part, if United States would think in this way, and if we are not able to cope the threats by ourselves, it is important to remain committed to the alliance, and it's important for us to make United States remain committed to the alliance, and that is much better and much safer than we, Japan or South Korea, pursuing its own nuclear deterrence. So then, instead of the nuclear options, what are allies doing in East Asia? One, as I mentioned, they try to make efforts to improve the credibility of extended nuclear deterrence, and so are working on the reassurance. On case of Japan, Japan and the United States has been doing extended deterrence dialogue, and recently they disclose more about the contents of the discussion in the dialogue, and it's a kind of public outreach to improve the credibility of the extended deterrence. And also, as I mentioned earlier, I think United States and Japan should be engaged in the more thorough, in-depth consultation on with the concrete scenarios of contingencies potentially that could include the scenarios of use of nuclear weapons. And in the case of ROK, U.S. B-52 flew over to South Korea, and also U.S. strategic nuclear submarine paid a port visit in Busan. And in my view, the strategic submarine should not do such kind of things, because that might expose strategic submarine to the risk of the tracking by the adversary. But I think this is kind of a more or less demonstration to the public to give a reassurance that the United States is committed to the defense of the South Korea. The second is building our own defense capabilities. As I said, Japan decided to increase in defense budget up to 2% of GDP, and also acquiring long-range strike capabilities. And they also strengthened the coordination with others in terms of coping with or countering the disinformation operations. The third is the building partnership with regional allies and like-minded countries. So Quad is one. Then also recently I heard a news that Japan is considering to join in the second pillar of AUKUS. AUKUS is a framework of Australia, United States, and the UK to share some sort of technological development activities, and also the United States and the UK will provide the nuclear attacking submarines to Australia. So Japan is not going to join the submarine deal, but join the development of high-tech and the application of high-tech into the security is the one that Japan is considering to participate. And also Japan is making some arrangements with regional partners like Australia and the Philippines about reciprocal access agreement, and conducting joint exercises and freedom of navigation operations with like-minded countries, including France. So the number of the joint exercises kind of now skyrocketing, so many joint exercises. And also the Japanese government decided that the new financial scheme of sort of official kind of security assistance. So they provide, for example, the Coast Guard ships to the Philippines or other materials, which is not the lethal but essential for the security, and that is funded by this other the new financial scheme. So about the dilemma of about the international aspect, I would like to share my thoughts, and I want to test with you whether it's really viable or not. I thought about dilemma of liberal international order, which actually John Ikenberry advocates, and many people thought that is in crisis. So the thing is, if Ukraine and NATO gets closer to the victory, then risk of nuclear use by Russia would be increased. But if we are going to avoid the nuclear catastrophe, it is necessary for us to make a compromise with Putin or Russia. So compromising with Russia means we have to cohabit with those who violated international law and the rules. So that means international rules, international laws are undermined, and their effectiveness is decreased. But if we try to preserve this rule-based international order, well, we cannot make a compromise. We have to find a way to restore the confidence of international law. But furthermore, if we stick to the liberal international order, then we have to face the challenge posed by so-called global south. The countries in the global south are mostly affected by the war in terms of supply of food and energy. So, if as we keep on sticking to the principles of liberal international order, then the countries in the global south will get more disappointed with what the West is doing. So these dilemmas are the big challenge for us, how we are going to maintain the sort of a rule-based international order without being challenged by the global south. So, when we talk about order, we tend to focus on those who created order, those who lead the order. But I think it is important for us to take note of what followers are thinking about. I think followers are following the order not because they have to, but I think they may find some benefit of being a kind of followers. And I don't think they would be happy to being called as a followers. So it is probably a kind of alarm for us to consider or reconsider the way how we try to manage the international system. And finally, I think I'm speaking too long, so I need to wrap up. But because I'm originally from the area of arms control and disarmament, let me talk a little bit about how we have to envision the arms control, even though now prospect is very slim, because China is not willing to talk about arms control at this moment. But it is important for us to think about what kind of issues that we have to address through the arms control. So in general, arms control plays three functions, serves three functions. One is risk management and reduction. And the second, managing the strategic relationship normally people tend to focus on this function. And thirdly, though the challenge is the need for the dialogue. And also dialogue itself is an important, platform for the confidence building. So for the short term, risk management is really effective and useful, functions that arms control have. And for that, the dialogue is probably essential. And in the long and medium term, how are we going to manage the strategic risks through establishing stable relationship? But furthermore, more strategically thinking, we have to think about another function. That is how we are going to frame the game of strategic competition. So setting the rule of competition and try to eventually prevail. And of course, if both sides are competing for how to prevail, it is probably impossible for them to agree on. And that's a difficult part. So it is important for us to study why the countries agreed on certain modality of the arms control, either by the United States and Soviet Union during the Cold War, or, the nations which are engaged in the Washington Naval Disarmament Treaty and so forth. But we have, before talking about the concrete modalities, what we see as a kind of challenges is as follows. Now, the players in arms control, in particular at the strategic level, are three, not two. Simply mathematically speaking, where is the stability equilibrium among the three, which are in a relationship of non-cooperation? Is there any stability among the three? Right? So if these three countries are in a shape of triangle, and if we could consider like three, it's a bundle of three bilateral relationship, that could be possible. But let's assume that the United States may face the partnership between China and Russia, it's kind of easily assumed that creates an imbalance in number of nuclear weapons. So what United States see current situations got two peer problems, right? That United States need to face Russia in Europe and face China in Asia front. So among three, is there any stable equilibrium among these? So that's a very basic question. The second is, it is important for us to take note of the differences in the strategic objectives and strategic goals that each player may have. The Chinese strategic goal, or so-called core interests, are very different in nature from what the United States identify as their kind of strategic objectives, and also even the Russia as well. So when they have differences in the strategic objectives and strategic goals, then they have different requirements for their military assets, and what that they may provide, they may give different functions to their military strategic assets. So, that relates to the scope of arms control. The third is, so that leads into the question on the strategic assets. What kind of assets should be regulated through the arms control? And again, as I mentioned earlier, we face so-called missile gap, the huge gap in the capability of medium-range missiles. How are we going to address this on top of the gap in the strategic assets? And the next is the gap in the expectations for the arms control among three. So, arguably, the United States can be seen as a kind of status quo power, and Russia is declining power, and China is probably identifying itself as a rising power. So if you, based upon the prospect theory, if you are in decline, if we are in the rising phase, then even with the same utility, they have expectation. They have different behavior. They take different behavior. So rising power probably is not going to agree on the fixing the status quo. And the status quo power probably is happy to fix as it is. And the declining power is trying to defend their influence despite of that their physical decrease. So because of difference in trajectory of a power projection among three, probably it could be really difficult for them to agree on fixing the status quo. Because arms control is the business of establishing the status quo and fixing as it is. Or if they are able to manage the dynamics, I think it's probably miraculous. So if they have three different trajectories, prospects for the power projections, then how can we have a solution? And from the Asian, the regional players' viewpoint, again, the problem comes to the question of stability paradox. If three major players agree, even if a big if they agree on the modality of arms control arrangement, from the regional players' viewpoint, that might give a kind of a blue signal to the China to be more assertive. If that happens, the arms control doesn't help us. In general, I think the strategic arms control will help to stabilize the regional security environment, and that is assumption from the Europe. But it's not necessarily the case, or at least we don't have a confidence that strategic stability may lead to stability at the regional level. So it is important for us to think about how we are going to manage two different types of stabilities. And second challenge is entanglements. Now we are witnessing interchangeability of the capabilities of nuclear assets and non-nuclear assets, including cyber. So cyber attack may kind of force others to lose the control over a nuclear arsenal. So if command and control system is broken, they are not able to effectively use their nuclear assets. So, this kind of interchangeable functions probably provide us a complexity of the calculation, the stability, and the modality of the arms control. And also, there is no clear boundary between strategic and non-strategic or sub-strategic domains. As I mentioned, the stability-instability paradox is very much symbolic of this fading boundary between strategic and non-strategic, sub-strategic domains. Thirdly, currently we don't have clear rules of engagement. During the Cold War, United States and Soviet Union decided to engage in the competition only in the offensive aspect by prohibiting the missile defense. But missile defense is very essential for the defense of Japan, defense of the United States. And the China probably is also developing their missile defense capabilities. And probably it's impossible now for us to just simply abandon. In particular, from non-nuclear weapon states' viewpoint, the missile defense is the only way that we, by ourselves, to defend from ourselves from nuclear attacks. So how can we abandon it? The third one is roles of the U.S. regional allies. China doesn't have allies. Some might say North Korea is the case, but no, I don't think North Korea is the allies as we define in the context of the alliance with the United States. It's a totally different type of relationship. But the United States has allies, Japan, ROK, the Philippines, and Australia. So, arranging shaping the modality of the arms control requires consideration on how we are going to accommodate the interests of non-nuclear regional allies. And finally, that is very big problem, the lack of habit of dialogue. So as I said, China is reluctant to engage in the dialogue, no appetite for the strategic dialogue. And I think they are showing that small appetite for the strategic dialogue, but probably not arms control. Recently, the China and the United States agree on talking about the impact of artificial intelligence in the nuclear relationship. I think it's a good sign, but now I think they just agreed on talk, and they don't agree on agenda. They don't agree on the any details. So there is no prospect that we are agreement on any aspect of the arms. Secondly, in this region, in Asia, we have many channels of dialogues, so-called hotlines among the security policy makers. But problem is, people don't pick up the phone when they need to pick up. So, for example, any incident happens. Normally, if incident happens, they try to communicate in order to avoid unnecessary escalation. But when any incident happens, people don't talk. For example, when Japan tries to call their counterpart in China, they don't pick up the phone. And there's similar things happen in the other relationship as well. So in Asia, we need to change such a habit, really bad habit. So, if we are going to envision what we need to talk for the arms control, we first of all have to set the agenda, and then we have to clarify the objectives. What will be the objectives of arms control? And we have to share the sense of necessity of arms control. And finally, who should be involved and how? Who is really responsible for the decision making? That's very important thing. So, finally, the conclusion. One, the nuclear risks are rising in Asia, and they are entangled with the regional conflicts over Taiwan and the Korean Peninsula. So it takes a shape of multi-domain entanglement and hybrid warfare under the long nuclear shadow. Two, U.S. allies in the region so far choose to strengthen their alliance with the United States and accept reassurance of extended nuclear deterrence instead of having their own nuclear deterrent capabilities. Three, the arms control in East Asia as means of managing and avoiding nuclear risks and reducing nuclear threats is not forthcoming, as China still prefers and it may not be kind of forthcoming doesn't show appetite. And fourth, that we should keep on requesting China to take transparency measures and engage in strategic dialogue on risk reduction and crisis communication measures. In particular, China stopped the reporting their plutonium management in 2017. So, and they seemingly started the operation of the fast breeder reactors for the production of plutonium stockpile. So, we can see how they conduct missile tests and what kind of asset they are creating as a delivery systems, but we don't know how much of the fissile materials they have. So maybe it is important for us that, all parties in the region should share the information on what kind of activities involved in nuclear weapons are taking place. So thank you very much for listening, and